welcome everybody. My name is Dave Bailey. This is Grief and Grace, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. In early March, companies and cities began a radical 2-week lockdown to deal with the approaching COVID-19 pandemic, and now here we are, over 6 months later, still struggling with it, and work and school and society has been radically altered and perhaps changed forever. But one of the beneficial things to emerge out of that is that there's been an increased openness and perhaps even a need to talk about the common human experience of grief. And so this Facebook Live was created to be one of the spaces and one of the voices helping to facilitate those conversations. And I'm so excited to have Michele Hernandez back with us tonight. Michele is the Executive Director of Soaring Spirits International and the founder of Camp Widow. And Michele was with us last week. We barely scratched the surface of all the things we wanted to talk about. So she generously agreed to come back and continue the conversation tonight. And I know that you'll be inspired by her and introduced to ideas and insights, and tonight especially a lot of resources. And if you know someone that you think could benefit from what we're talking about here tonight, especially a widowed person that you know is going through it, or someone that's recently widowed, why don't you go ahead and tag them in the comments so that they'll get a notification and they can come and join us. Also, if you have a question during the show, just put it in the comments section, and if we have some time at the end, we'll take an opportunity to answer some of those, or as many of those as we can before we sign off. All right, Michele, thank you for coming back.
It's great to be back. I feel like we had so much more to talk about, so thank you for making space for another conversation.
All right. For those who missed it last week, can you start by giving us a little thumbnail sketch of your story? Because one of the wonders for me is that you found purpose in the middle of your grief, and you began to tangibly create something that honored your love, that honored your loss, that honored your grief, and that honored your future.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm happy to just revisit. I was 35 years old when my 39-year-old husband went out for his regular weekly bike ride, and he was hit from behind by a car and died an hour later.
Wow.
At the time, we had 3 young adults. He had 3 young adult children. I had 3 just becoming preteen kids. We had a blended family of 6. And I went from being a wife and mother of 6 to being a widow with 6 very different grieving children, and trying to figure out what was I supposed to do with myself now. So that journey sort of led me on a quest to answer questions like, what do I do with my wedding ring? What should I do about all of those shoes that he has all over, lined under the bed and in the closet, taking up way more space than my shoes? Mostly just practical stuff. I wanted to know how to do this widowed life, and I didn't know who to ask. So I set out to interview 50 other widows who would be willing to share their insights with me. It took me about a year to do the interviews, and at the end, what I realized was that rather than write down all of their responses and make a book out of it, I really wanted to create a community out of it, because there was something special about being in the presence of another person who had experienced the type of loss I had. Though we could have very different stories, we just really had this deep layer of understanding, and I felt hopeful in the presence of other widowed people in a way that I'd never felt hopeful before, in particular as it related to trying to build a life for myself after my husband's death. So that journey led me to really offer that opportunity to connect with other widowed people, to as many people as I could find. And here we are 12 years later. Phil actually died 15 years ago. So 3 years after his death, I founded Soaring Spirits International with the purpose of offering a community to other widowed people. And since that time, we've been just humbled to have facilitated the connections for over 3 million widowed people through our online and in-person programs, which have all been designed with the express purpose of creating a peer community with which you can walk through all of the various challenges, the joys and the challenges of being widowed.
Yeah.
So that's a nutshell. That's me in a nutshell.
Wow. All right. So one of the things that we've tried to do here is talk about all the different faces of grief, because people, it just comes in so many different ways, so many different packages. Let's talk about this. What are some of the unique challenges that widowed people face?
Well, I first want to just back up quickly to say how grateful I am that you're making this, that you've created a space for the conversations around grief, because I think one of the most challenging parts for widowed people or for grieving people in general is that it's so little understood, the process of grieving a person that you love. And the more we talk about it, the more that we normalize this experience, the better able all of us will be to support each other through, loving humans. So we know that anything we love that has a heartbeat, at some point that heart will stop. And to be able to know that we have a community of people who will support us as we walk through that loss is so important. So I thank you for this space.
One of the things that I say often is the first breath and the last breath come as a package deal. You can't get one without the other. And we all know that. But knowing it and actually dealing with it or having a conversation about it or wanting to have a conversation about it is a totally separate thing. And so, I saw when COVID started especially, and people weren't able to be with their loved ones as they were in the hospital or in the nursing home or whatever, and then they couldn't celebrate their life after. I was like, we've got to create some space for people, because so that's where all this came from. And then we began to talk about the different faces of grief, and you're here tonight. I am just stoked that you're here.
Well, me too. So I'll answer the question you asked me, which is what's unique about the widowed experience. And in my opinion, there's two specific things. The first is that when your partner or spouse dies, everything about your life changes. And so, the place that you sleep, where you went to lunch, the fact that you go to work and come home to a different house than the one you came home to before the person died. Like, so much of your everyday is tied up in the partnership that you've created. And when that person dies, then you are rethinking everything. Suddenly, everything is up for grabs, because you're now in this alone where once you were in a partnership. And that leads to the next piece of that for, to answer what's challenging about being widowed, is that for many people, they assume that the death experience is the hardest day. And it is an excruciating experience to say goodbye to someone that you're, whose life is ending. However, for me, the hardest part was to answer the question, what do I do with myself now? Like, I had a life plan. I liked the one I had. I was not interested in creating a new one. And yet there was no choice but to create a new one. And so the hard work of widowhood is first the actual time of saying goodbye, whether you had that chance in person or not. It is the saying goodbye. It is the separating of spending your physical time and physical space together. But it is also then the discovering of what to do with not only with your life, but with your grief and with your love. How do we transform that? How do we integrate what has happened into the life that we're building? And it's interesting because it's not just widowed people who understand this. My 14-year-old daughter, well, she's not 14 anymore. She's 29 now, but she was 14 at the time when Phil died. And not long after, maybe 2 years or so, she was about 16. And one of her very good friends from high school's mom died. And we walked sort of through that early couple of days with this family. And at one point she said to me, Mom, I know this is not the hardest day for them, because she knew that what was ahead was missing them and integrating that missing and that longing for what was into whatever you build next. So, that's the hard work of grief, is calling us to take that love and find a way to embrace it even after the person we love is no longer physically present.
So then let me ask you from the other side, how do you support someone, specifically in the area of widowhood? How do you support someone in the middle of grief?
That's such a great question, and the answer is hard, because what really is such a benefit to any person who's grieving, but I'll speak to widowed people and to my personal experience, is to have people who can just sit with you. They don't need to fix it, because here's the thing: you cannot fix it. The person is dead, and that is not a problem that can be solved. And so especially our U.S. culture has been trained to attack a problem and fix it. And so it's very uncomfortable to sit with someone who appears to you to be broken and is broken, right? The breaking of that bond, that physical plane, is a breaking, and you feel broken. And so to be able to sit with someone who's broken and not say, here, let me put that piece on and let me put this together, and if you only tried this for your sleep, and if you did that instead, it seems to me it's a natural inclination to try to fix when this person is not able to be fixed by any effort that you make. But loving them and being able to sit with them will provide a comfort that there's no words for how beautiful it is when you don't have to be alone. I had friends who would pick me up from my house. They would drive me to their house. They would have dinner already ready, and I could eat or not eat. Nobody shoot over me to see if I was eating food. And I could talk or not talk. I could cry or laugh. There were no expectations of me. I could just be in that space with them. And it was the place I always wanted to go, because it was the only place where I didn't feel watched or, judged isn't the right word. There's more of a hovering that kind of happens. And another brief story is that my sister and I look very, very much alike. And when she came to my city, she lives in San Diego, I live in Simi Valley. When she came to my city to be with me after Phil's death, she took my car to go get gas. And while she was getting gas, someone saw her and thought she was me. And she came home to me and she said, "Do they always look at you like that?" And I said, yes. Because we're afraid, right? Because people want to help you and they want to not say the wrong thing. But really, sometimes that creates this bubble that makes you feel like no one's accessible to you, because they're so afraid of hurting you, or they're so afraid of what you might say back to them. And they don't have words, that they instead create a space between you and them that feels distant enough that you don't feel supported. And so to be able, the other bit of advice I'll give is offer only what you can actually do. So let's say you could take the kids to school, then offer to take the kids to school. Let's say you're willing to, call when you're at the grocery store and say, "Hey, I'm at the grocery store right now. Do you need milk or anything? I'll just drop it on the porch. I won't even see you." Like, giving people the opportunity to have specific help offered rather than the general, "I'm here for anything you might need." So often we can't figure out what we need. And then when we decide we need something, the effort to call someone, or the vulnerability to have someone call them and then maybe they say they can't, is usually enough that people don't ask. And so when you're very specific about what you offer, then people have the opportunity to say, "Why, yes, that particular thing would be really helpful. Thank you." Or another thing is send a gift card for dinner in the mail. So rather than a meal, which is lovely, but I will tell you that I don't know, at one point I'm pretty sure I had 8 lasagnas in my freezer. And my children to this day still will not eat lasagna because they feel like that's grief food. And it comes from this beautiful, lovely place. But if you send a gift card in the mail to a local place that delivers, then on that night when this person has just had enough, they're like, "Oh, that's right, I have that gift card. I could just order dinner." So it's the really practical things that can just provide a respite from the extra work that a person who used to be a part of a partnership and is now an individual and trying to balance what used to be balanced by 2 people, that respite can be such a powerful gift. So it may feel small. It might feel like you're not really doing that much, but I can assure you that those kindnesses go a really, really long way.
Wow. That is so, wow. I love that little phrase. Grief is not a problem to be solved.
Yeah.
I just think if we could just remember that.
Yep.
Grief is not a
Yeah, and
problem
it's
to
a
be
hard
solved.
it's a hard thing. It's hard to sit with someone when you feel like there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the misconception is that sitting with them is nothing.
Yes.
But the truth is that sitting with them can be everything,
Yes.
and can provide them with the safe space where they feel like they don't have to be alone, but they're also not expected to have hold up the social norms that usually would be included in a meeting with people where, you're supposed to chat and you're supposed to interact. And if you can just be the person who lets them be however they are, they may be chatting and interacting one day or 1 minute, and then the next minute they may not. And if you can be okay with that, you've provided a safe space that I promise you not that many people are able to do.
Totally. So can you talk about this for a little bit? One of the things that people often struggle with, in my experience, is the question of whether they're doing grief right. So some time passes, they think, I'm doing good, and then grief washes over them once again, and they feel like they're going to drown in it. And in the middle of all that comes a question: what am I doing wrong here? So, yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I want to just say how common it is. Like you said, I've had this experience myself, and I've heard it countless times. I thought I was good. I was going forward. Now suddenly I feel like I've taken 25 steps back, and I don't know why. I can't explain it. And so I like to remind people that while you are processing your regular everyday life, in the background, your mind, your body, your emotions, they're all processing the fact that this person that was a critical part of your life is not physically present anymore. And so you're working, you're also grieving. You're talking on the phone, you're also grieving. You're taking care of the kids, you're also grieving.
Yes.
You're making dinner, you're also grieving. And the grief is such a background sometimes that we forget that it just sits there behind every other thing that we do. And so of course you get tired. And sometimes an event, it's also funny because sometimes it's not anything big. Like people maybe would expect that a holiday that was of particular significance to you might be a hard day. But my late husband was in air conditioning and heating, which meant that every rainy day was a day off for him. And so on a rainy day, he would call me incessantly to find out if I was coming home from work because he had the day off. And so no one knew to call me on the first rainy day. Or no one knew that 3 years later on a rainy day when I was home alone and, the kids were at school and I didn't have to be at work, that I would cry for him because it was a rainy day. And so it's the small things that come back to you. Imagine, how long it can take to be immersed in a person. And then you think, oh, and I'm supposed to be over that in 365 days? When you start actually counting the days of the years, it's like, wow. And what would you say? This is what I ask people all the time. What would you say to your best friend? Would you tell them they were doing it wrong? Or would you give them some grace around what's probably really, really hard?
Yes.
And we so often don't offer that grace to ourselves, which we would generously give to someone else who told us the story that is our story. So if someone told me their story, and I'm offering them grace, I need to remember to give myself that same grace and know that grieving someone doesn't take a certain amount of time, and that these refreshing of the grief in whatever way that comes, mine's a rainy day, someone else's will be something different. The refreshing of that grief is not a step backwards. It's a step in. It's a step into the grief that's just sitting right there under the background, hanging out. And so you step into it and you realize like, oh, it's still there. Even though you feel like, oh, I was so wishing that it was gone on the one hand. And on the other hand, grief is related to love. They're tied together. And so you don't want to lose the love. And what that means is that you'll never entirely lose the grief. But what happens is it softens and you carry it differently. And the moments where you dig back into the grief are farther and farther apart. But, that's going to take however long it takes. I always wish there was a formula where you could say, do this, do this, do this.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, every one of us does it differently. And we want the love. We want to retain the love. And so being able to allow ourselves grace around the grief will help us to make sure we continue to access that love going forward.
I love one writer said, grief is love with nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah. So.
Well, and I think one of the things that we do when we make meaning from our loss is find a place for that love.
Yes.
We find a way
Yes.
to use that love to transform. And I like to point this out because the founding of Soaring Spirits and the explosion of support that happened after that, it was a team effort. There were a lot of people involved. There was a lot of dedication to the cause. But if your transformation, if you're making meaning out of loss looks like taking care of your grandkids, or if it looks like being able to reach out to another grieving person in a way you never would have before because that's not your thing, that is also a transformation.
Yes.
That is also making meaning. It can be 100 things, from what feels small and insignificant to you, like being able to sit with someone in grief, to, building organizations, writing books, like doing the other things that I know we've heard of other people's transformation taking those paths. I just like to remind people that whatever path your transformation takes, whatever meaning you're able to make from your experience, and my definition of that is taking that love and being able to offer it in a way that's meaningful to someone else, that is making meaning. That is transformation, and it will fill your heart. It always is.
That's so awesome. So, 10th century poet Judah Halevi said, "'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch." I ponder that statement a lot. So as a widow or a widower, how do you make room for love again when so much of your pain is around the loss of the person that you loved?
Yeah, and I would say that I love that quote, because no one knows that better than someone who has had to say goodbye to the physical body of someone that they love. And knowing that, like you said earlier, we understand that the first and the last breath come together, that they're a package deal and there's no way that you're getting one without the other. But we fall into the trance of life, and we are able to distance ourselves from that reality. Well, when you have experienced it personally in whatever relationship you're grieving, you end up having a heightened awareness of that. And it can sometimes lead people to separate themselves from others, to, in their fear of not wanting to live that again, to make it almost impossible to get to their heart, because they think that the best way to protect themselves is to build some walls up. And what I've discovered is that that's pretend. We're protecting ourselves, because every single person we love, everyone will die. And that's a reality that comes from their birth. And so what we end up having to do is decide, actively choose to love anyways. And to know that, most widowed people, what you ask, will without hesitation say, yes, I would do it again. If I knew what the outcome was, I would do it again. And what I say to myself in regards to that is, Phil's love changed my life. Living with him, marrying him, being a part of his life altered me in 100 ways. And if I could say that I would do it again and that was so valuable, then wouldn't it also be true that another love could be equally valuable, even if I have to say goodbye to that person sooner than I would want to? And actively choosing to love someone else broadens the scope of your love, opens up another door to your heart, and allows you a different experience than the one you had before. And it's not a trading. The beauty is you get to keep them both. And so for me, it's about this concept of being willing to understand the reality of life, the reality of the brevity of life, and rather than letting that scare you into making your life smaller, that it would encourage you to make your life bigger, to take that space and make it larger so that more love is available, because that love is also going to transform you.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot
I
packed into
should
that.
probably also tell people that I have remarried, because this is a question I get regularly. And how does my husband feel? My husband Michael feel about my late husband Phil? He feels like they would have been friends,
Oh,
and he feels that knowing that I have continued to love Phil means that if he were to die tomorrow, I would continue to love him too. And so it really speaks to him. My love for Phil speaks to him about the type of love that I'm capable of, and he assumes and knows that that love is applied to him too. And so it's not a comparison of, who do I love more. I love them each their own way, in the same way I love each of my three children in
yes.
the same way. And so, even for people who maybe don't have their own kids, it's like, that when, another niece or nephew is born, or when someone else is added to your life and you think, oh, I couldn't love anybody more. It's like, oh, but I love you too. And I love you too. It just opens your world in such
Yes.
a beautiful way.
Love's not a zero-sum game.
Nope, it isn't. Thank
It's not
goodness.
like I've got 100 and when I subtract this little bit, I've got less and less and less. It's not a zero-sum game. It's this ever unfolding, ever growing, ever developing wonder. Yeah.
It really is. And thank goodness for that.
Yes.
Because that truth is what allows the memory of our loved ones to live on so beautifully, and for us to be able to reflect that love back to other people is just the best type of legacy. What
Yes.
better legacy could there be for someone you love than to love someone else and to allow that love to influence you in such a way that you say, I would choose it again.
Wow.
And it's a beautiful way to continue loving, by loving other people. And by that, I mean all kinds of people,
Yes.
not necessarily just a relationship, a romantic relationship, but being able to allow yourself to make meaningful connections with people, even when you recognize that at some point they are going to die. And, people will get uncomfortable sometimes with that reality when it's pointed out in that way. But what I love about my experience with widowed people is that, most of the time they're just like, heck yeah.
Been
Yep,
there.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, been there, and I get that. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So we wanted to talk about some resources tonight. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about to tell people about your Tuesday, Thursday check-ins, because they're amazing.
Awesome.
Your last one, I loved
Thank
your 10 things that you learned about marriage. That was
Great,
very
thank you.
cool. And the Festival of Hope, we should visit that a little bit again.
Great.
And then the Resilience Center. That's what we really want
Yeah.
to bring people to, all of those resources tonight.
Awesome. Well, I'll quickly say that for my Facebook check-ins, Tuesdays and Thursdays, Michele Neff Hernandez is my Facebook page, and I do them live from my Facebook page. Like you, Dave, I just felt called to offer a space for people to
Yes.
process what was happening in the world. And I thought that it would just be for, I don't know, I'm not sure what you thought, but I was thinking, well, this looks like lockdown's going to be 6 to 8 weeks. I could cover that 6 to 8
Yeah,
weeks
exactly.
by checking in with people. I thought that was going to be it. But like you said, here we are months later, and my check-ins sort of cover the scope of the kind of things that we're all dealing with here and there, as well as sort of touching on more specific things to widowhood. But what you mentioned last week was the 10-year anniversary, my husband and I's 10-year wedding anniversary. And so I did the top 10 things that being widowed taught me about being married. And it's wonderful to be able to share both my personal experience and then, more global experiences with people as we deal with anxiety, as we deal with disappointment, as we deal with isolation, as we make our way through all of these different challenges. So the Tuesdays and Thursday check-ins are at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the videos are available on my Facebook page. I sent Dave a very funny photo of all the various faces I was making during these videos.
Yes, that
So,
was like, what?
I know. I'm just like kind of keeping it real. Like I
Yeah.
I pop on whatever I'm wearing. We just have a talk, and then we're off and running to the next thing. So, Anyways, I'm happy to have anyone join. It's not specific to widowhood necessarily, because it really was begun to hold that space for everyone as they were making their way through their personal feelings about both the pandemic and then the variety of things that have happened since. So that's Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then Festival of Hope, I'm super excited about. You can find that from the Soaring Spirits website. That's soaringspirits.org. And the purpose of that is to explore year-end traditions through, from last week was our first week. So we started with the tradition of Rosh Hashanah. And this week we're doing fall equinox. And then every week until the end of the year, we'll be exploring a different year-end tradition from all over the world, various religions, various rituals, just an opportunity to walk through the rest of the year together, knowing that, as you mentioned, a lot of what's happening in our world is altering the way we will spend our holidays this year. And so we wanted to be able to acknowledge that and give people an opportunity to be in community, even if they're not able to go to Aunt Susie's regular Thanksgiving dinner. So Festival of Hope is free. It's an 18-week program. You can interact as much or as little as you like. All of the videos are available on the Festival of Hope website, which can be found through the Soaring Spirits website. Just click on Festival of Hope, and it'll show you a side menu that gives you options to view the videos from this week, so you can test it out and see if it's something you'd like to try. And it's never too late. You can join at any time. So that's Festival of Hope, which, like I said, we're super excited about. It's been fun so far. Today we'll be doing an introduction to the fall equinox. And then lastly, our Resilience Center. So one of the things that I learned over the last 12 years was that resilience is something that we can consciously build. And that if we focus on providing ourselves with research-based tools that directly reach out to various pieces of building resilience, that we can give ourselves the respite that we need, as well as confidence and the ability to, the definition of resilience is to bounce back from difficult situations, right? So the Soaring Spirits Resilience Center was started 2 years ago.
I'm just going to pull up the website here.
Actually, it's housed in Texas, in Kerrville, Texas. So in wine country in Texas, on the campus of Schreiner University. And our purpose is to study resilience specifically in widowhood. And so we have surveyed over 2,500 widowed people and collected their answers to a variety of questions designed to ask them the question, what does resilience look like to you? So instead of us defining resilience for them, we asked them to define resilience for us. And that led to this assessment. So on the Soaring Spirits Resilience Center website, which I think we were going to screen share, I'll give you a...
Yeah, I've got it up.
Okay, awesome. So from that page, we'll go to take the assessment. And what the assessment will do is take you through a series of questions designed to help focus your energy. So if you have only this much energy because you've been busy grieving and working and taking care of the house and doing all the things you have to do every day, where should you spend that tiny amount of energy you have left over in the best way that you can to support yourself and build resilience? And the assessment is designed to help you answer some questions that will help you determine what that is. Not only when you take the assessment will you find out what your score is in the various areas, which is integration, which is agency and self-identity. So it's like, how do I see myself in the world? How am I dealing with the separation of a couple anymore? What areas am I having a hard time integrating into my life? So you'll get an assessment, you'll get scores back from your assessment, but the intention is to help you say, okay, then I could spend a little more time. I'll just give you a brief example. If you're having trouble with, let's say, getting all your paperwork together for your finances, and you realize that that's an area that you're struggling with, if you were to take one, watch a couple videos, do something to increase your knowledge in that area, immediately your resilience rises because you feel capable. And
Yes.
so it's a way of helping people determine for them, because everyone's answer is going to be different and everyone's areas, kind of pain points, right, are going to be different. And so being able to figure out what those are, that the assessment was designed to help you do that. But not only to help you figure out what the pain points are, but also to give you some suggestions for increasing resilience in those specific areas. The assessment is free. It was published in the Omega Journal of Death and Dying just last year, September 11th, believe it or not. September 11th, 2019 was the publication date for the Widowed Resilience Scale, which you can find for free on the Widowed Resilience
Yes.
website.
And it's just that, Widow Resilience, all one word, widowresilience.org. And you can
Yes,
get there from the Soaring Spirits
absolutely.
website as well, or you can go directly widowresilience.org. Yeah, amazing, amazing amount of resources on there. Amazing.
We are super excited about it, and it's not just for widowed people, it's also for social workers, for psychologists, for therapists. You have the opportunity to use the scale for your clients. We also offer a scoring template so that
Mm-hmm.
you can get a sense of what we were trying to test. All of that is free and available through the Widowed Resilience
Wow.
Center website.
Wow. So many of the resources are free, Michele. How do you fund all of this?
We are always looking for people who believe in the work we do, and we are run entirely on donations.
Wow.
Sometimes we'll get a small grant here and there, for which, of course, we're always grateful. But by and large, it's our community who believes in our work and donates to make sure that we keep doing what we're doing.
Wow. Just talk quickly about the New Widow package as well. I know I reached
Oh,
out to you this
yes.
week and asked for some, and you're going to make sure that I have more on hand here so that I can distribute them. But talk about that a little bit.
One thing we realized was that newly widowed people really could benefit from having all of the resources compiled in something that they could physically hold in their hand. And then it can, get lost in the house and rise to the top of the pile of mail, or it can, slide out from under the door at one point or another. We just wanted there to be a physical presence so that it could be something that was tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we put together was called the Newly Widowed Packet. It is something that you can request for free from our website. What the purpose of it is to connect a widowed person with our resources, directing them specifically to those for the newly widowed so that they have an opportunity to explore the variety of ways that we have put together for specifically supporting people who are new to the widowed experience. They are available through the Soaring Spirits website. There's a button that says Get a Newly Widowed
Mm-hmm.
Packet. You just click on that button. The form is easy to fill out. One thing I will mention is that we don't send them unsolicited. So anyone who would like one for a friend would order it for themselves and then send it on to their friend. That's why Dave's requested some, so he'll have them. That way you don't have anyone feeling perhaps at risk or vulnerable because someone sent them mail about their widowhood that they didn't request. So we send out sometimes up to 200 a week, depending on the weeks. So we've sent out over 10,000 of these newly widowed packets for free. This is one of the things that our donors pay for. So they will fund X number of widowed packets per month by being a part of our membership program, which is a recurring donation. So let's say they signed up for $25. They'd send out they would be funding 5 newly widowed packets a month.
Wow.
And those packets are sent to the widowed person for free. It's just been an incredible way for people to feel like they can do something.
Mm-hmm.
So, we were just talking about what can you do for someone who's newly widowed, being able to order a packet for them, write a personal note and send it to them in the mail is a great way to be able to say, I care about you. I saw these resources. I thought that they might be something valuable.
Wow.
And what you're offering them is a connection to a community.
Yes, true. All right, I need to let you go because you got to go do Festival of Hope. But I'm going to
That's
squeeze.
Right. Time for autumn.
Exactly. I'm going to squeeze one more question out of you before I let you go. If there was one thing that you wanted us to know about grief and shaping a life with grief as a companion on the journey, what would it be?
I think that the pivotal lesson for me has been to integrate my past, my present, and my future. And so often we're we're encouraged to move on, to leave the past in the rearview mirror, to walk away from the things that have broken us and hurt us in order to feel healed. But rather than walk away from it, we take those lessons with us. We learn from the way we survived.
Yes.
We learn from the opportunity to fix things that we ourselves find are broken in ourselves as through our grief, and be able to transform as we move through. But if we leave behind the past, then we leave all the lessons and the tools and the resources that we've gathered as an inaccessible part of what we do. So rather than leave it back there, I say bring it with you. Make sure you bring it with you, and bring your person with you. You are never going to be without the person you love, for as long as you're willing to allow love and grief to sit together side by side. It hurts. But it's also the most beautiful experience to know that the people we love are always with us, and for as long as we are able to allow those moments of grief to be a part of our life, missing them to be part of our life. But the beauty of the whole is that what we learn in the past becomes a resource in our present and helps us shape our future.
Wow. Michele Neff Hernandez.
It's been a pleasure, Dave.
Oh my God, you are a treasure and a wonder. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You have a generosity of spirit that is just so amazing. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the lives that you touch. And thank you for stopping by. I hope that you'll come back again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Let's do this again.
All right, let's do it. All right,
Dave. Thank you for the work you're doing in the world. It's a gift, and I appreciate it.
All right, go do
Have
Festival
a
of
good night.
Hope. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Oh, wow. So even after this live is over, you can still leave comments. I love some of the comments I'm seeing. You can still leave comments or questions. I'll be coming back to review them. And if you want a new Widow Pack, you can go to soaringspirits.org. You can request one off the website there. Or if you write Grief and Grace, you can write me, Dave, at griefandgrace.com, and I will make sure that I put one in the mail to you. Don't forget to click on notifications so that you can get a reminder when we're ready to go live with our Grief and Grace show. And please share this on all your social media platforms. You can also find these conversations archived on the Grief and Grace page on YouTube. I really encourage you to plan to be with us next Monday night. Our guest is going to be Dr. Nancy Burns from Drake University. Dr. Burns is a sociologist and the author of the book Closure. And we're going to explore a little bit about what it means to let go of the idea that someday you'll find closure. And rather than that, being curious about the ongoing process of grief and looking at how it changes us and how it can empower us throughout our life. So, that's next Monday night, 6 o'clock Central Time. All right. Thank you for being here. Stay safe, everybody.